Welcome to Citizens Climate University tonight, everyone. CCU is a weekly webinar program of Citizens Climate Lobbies that provides CCL supporters like you and I with access to in-depth training opportunities on topics relating to climate change and effective climate advocacy. I'm your host, Brett Cease, tonight, and we're very lucky to have with us the one and only Joan Blades with us. Joan Blades and her husband, Wes Boyd, co-founded the political action group MoveOn.org. You may have heard of them before in 1997. And in 2006, she co-founded Moms Rising, dedicated to bringing millions of people together who all share a common concern about the need to build a more family-friendly America as a nonpartisan force. Her latest project, though, is what we're having her join us tonight with, Living Room Conversations. It seeks to bridge the political divide in America by encouraging people with differing views to come together for respectful discussions. And we'll find out in just a little bit, these conversations increase understanding, they reveal common ground, and sometimes they even allow us to discuss possible solutions. And so with that, let's jump in and find out about what tonight's learning goals are. They're really threefold. We want to make sure that attendees tonight, afterwards, will have the chance to really understand where and how to facilitate living room conversations, describe the mission behind why living room conversations started, and also know how to have the tools and access with resources to host your own climate change or energy-related conversations within your own living room or community. So in order to do that, we have a six-fold agenda. It's pretty straightforward. We're going to start with Joan really being able to highlight what is a living room conversation in particular. We'll transition to more of a walkthrough of how to host an event. We'll pivot from there to the specific topics on climate change and energy that her team has prepared to help you out within your own communities. And then we'll have some special considerations for CCL groups and, kind of helping figure out how we can use these as an organization. We'll have the chance to share your own experience and thoughts, and then pivot to a Q&A discussion afterwards, especially with some follow-up from the March call, which Joan also was the lead on for Citizens Climate Lobby's national call in March. So I'm going to pass it to you, Joan, in just a little bit, but I wanted to give a grounding or a context before launching in of really what kind of change living room conversations is bringing about in our country right now. And I think there was no better quote to demonstrate that than this one from Mark Mettler, who you have had conversations with to help launch this organization with as the co-founder of the Tea Party Patriots. And here's his words. Living room conversations is a critical step in helping people to see that they have a lot in common. Only by learning to respect each other and working together in this way is real change possible. I think you'll see that you have a lot in common with all of us in those values tonight, Joan. We're excited and eager to learn more. And with that, we'll turn it over to you. And thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for a great introduction. And I love what CCL does. The reality is that living room, I first started talking across differences because I wanted to know why conservatives weren't concerned about climate change. And, the first slide here starts with facts don't convince people, because as a founder of Move On, I'm a mediator by origin and training, and I had not been focused on politics particularly. I started seeing people having these debates and doing persuasion and so little happening. And you have to go back to the science and you start to see that human beings make decisions based on their gut over 90% of the time. And then we give the reasons for it. Then our brains come up with the reasons. So when we think that we're going to be able to persuade someone to change their minds, you're not even being heard typically until we're in relationship. And so living room conversations are really focused on getting us to go for the relationship. We don't even hear people that we don't have a relationship with. And once we do, everything changes. And then facts are very important. So at the Living Room Conversation website, the title's Respect, Relate, Connect. And we are offering this as an open source opportunity for anyone to do a living room conversation. And we have over 60 topics. And what a living room conversation is just two people with different viewpoints, each invite two friends to have a conversation about an agreed upon topic. And we'll talk about two climate topics shortly here. But once we start hearing each other and we start understanding our differences, and once we start caring about each other, then sometimes we even start caring about what our friends care about. Typically we do. And I can say that my friend Jacob in Utah, when I first met him, climate was not on his list of concerns. But because he became a friend and because he had another friend that was deeply concerned about climate, Jacob started to care about climate. Now, not the way I care about it, but he cares about it. And so people open to more ideas when we have these relationships. And then we had the capacity to talk about it. And I learned a lot about him too in the process of that friendship, and found it really fascinating that he identified that climate change is our end time story. And so we continue to talk, and it's a very valuable way for us to begin to find more and more common ground. Now, living room conversations, when we initially started them, were in living rooms, but they are actually all over the place now. They're in coffee schools, and we're doing them in conferences settings too. Optimally, a living room conversation, you have a couple of hours and you really have time to sit down and get to know each other. But in a conference setting, you can do a shorter version. And we choose just a topic that's going to interest other folks. And we are now starting to do them by video as well as in person because, well, while we have differences, we want to heal relationships locally and also nationally. So I see we've got, next up is the how to host a conversation slide. And it's kind of got a 1, 2, 3 up online. There's a place where you can choose your topic, and then you find a co-host, and there are a set of conversation agreements that basically what you learned in kindergarten: be curious, take turns, be respectful, own your part of the conversation. And people do this. They do it naturally. And you will choose someone, and you would choose to ask a co-host and invite guests that would be good with following those kinds of ground rules. And then you select a date and a location together. And I think with the Citizens Climate Lobby, we're going to be asking people to register a conversation. I'm afraid a lot of people do just have conversations on their own because this is open source. Have the conversation, and then we really, really want feedback, because when we get the feedback, it gives us the capacity to continue to improve our practices. And that's, part of open source is we keep on learning from the people that are using this practice, and it's really valuable. So the next slide is about the conversation agreements. And the fact is, we've never heard about it going wrong. Probably the worst thing that's happened is people have talked too much. I'm sure someone's going to achieve this someday, but there have been hundreds, and I think actually thousands of conversations at this point where people have really made some good relationships, and that's really exciting. Typically, everybody reads them by themselves. I mean, one at a time, we go around in a circle because we have 6 people. And I'm going to see if you have the shortened version up there. So I'm going to take a look and see if I have the full length version up.
I think they should be in the slide notes 411.
Okay, I'll take a look. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm moving around poorly. There we are. So we would just go around in a circle, everyone taking one. The first one is be curious and open to learning. Conversation is as much about listening as it is about talking. Enjoy hearing all points of view. Maintain an attitude of exploration. And then the next person would have show respect and suspend judgment. Human beings tend to judge one another. Do your best not to. Setting judgments aside opens you up to learning from others and makes them feel respected and appreciated. And the next, find common ground and note differences. Look for common ground you can agree on and take an interest in the differing beliefs and opinions of others. Next, be authentic and welcome that from others. Share what's important to you. Speak authentically from your personal experience. Be considerate of others doing the same. And be purposeful and to the point. Notice if what you are saying is not pertinent to the topic at hand. Finally, own and guide the conversation. Take responsibility for the quality of your participation and that of the conversation. Be proactive in getting yourself and others back on track if needed. How to facilitate a conversation. We're describing it as a self-facilitated process because the conversation agreements include owning your part of the conversation. And that allows it so this practice could actually go viral if people chose to. We've created a structure that holds the conversations in a way that allows people to start things. So when you are having the conversation, you have additional facilitation options to read, and it's, you know, part of the practice as a co-host. You look at it, but typically, you know, when you're in person, you're just taking from it. You own the conversation collectively together, and it goes very well that way. So with the climate change conversation, you start with the opening paragraph. It's time to change the climate of our climate conversations by not huddling under our umbrellas with only those that think what we believe is true. Let's be brave enough to curiously listen to a broad spectrum of views about the culture of our earth from fellow citizens. So no matter how far nor how firmly you stand in your view of climate change, there is space for you to individually facilitate a change in the climate of our climate conversations. Now that was actually largely written by my friend Jacob in Utah, who invited me to come and have the climate conversation there in Utah and then talk at a Village Square event and invite everyone in the Village Square event to have a climate conversation. And one of the things I've been learning is that the climate conversation has really changed in the last number of years because we have very different economics behind climate now. It's a really good time to be having this conversation. So the rounds, the container, after you've gone through the ground rules together and you've gone through the opening paragraph, rounds 1 and 2 are very simple. It's basically, why did you come? Why did you choose this conversation? And then round 2 is giving people a chance to start talking a little bit about their core values, so that by the time you're at the topic you've chosen, people like each other. There's a sense of relationship, and we're listening differently then. So the core values questions: what purpose guides you in your life? What would your best friend say about who you are and what makes you tick? You know, I've had a lot of people tell me that they invited friends and they got to hear from their friends in a different way too. So it not only deepened and created new friendships, but it deepened friendships they already had. So this is actually a really fun conversation. Now, round 3 is the heart of the living room conversation. And in round 3, we're talking about our own personal experience of the topic. So it's a listening event. The kinds of questions are, do you believe that climate change is a natural cycle of the earth, man-made or both? Are you concerned about climate change? Share your views. Are you frustrated by the amount of attention given to climate change? Share your views. Have you made any changes to your lifestyle, energy consumption due to your views on climate change? Are you concerned about the quality of air, cleanliness, or water sources, food sources? Do you feel that everything's fine as it is and there's no need to worry? So in this case, we're just listening to people. They choose 1 or 2 of those things to talk about. And often there's time to go around a couple times in this conversation. And I've learned a lot having these conversations over the years and really seeing that people's perception is changing around climate. And we're always ready to have better questions. So if you do this conversation and you have a question you like more, I'm hoping that you'll send it to us so that we can share it and that you'll become part of a growing online community of people having these conversations and improving them. Because this is a starting point. We're not there yet, but you know that. You're Citizens Climate Lobby. So that we also have an energy conversation because there is a whole group of people that probably aren't going to show up to a conversation about climate because that's not a concern they have. We learned that our pilot project was actually about energy and climate. And that was was in 2010, 2011. At that time, there were a group of people that said, yeah, this is not my concern. And we realized that it should be a conversation about energy for a bunch of people. And that opening paragraph just focuses on energy. Since the 1970s, presidential candidates have used energy as a key platform promise, highlighting our need to be energy independent. As our awareness of our vulnerability and relying on foreign sources of energy and the global nature of energy companies grew, we started using more alternative power and accessing more domestic resources than ever before. So what exactly do we mean by energy security? In this conversation, we talk about our evolving understanding of energy sustainability, energy choices, and how our lives are impacted by the energy we use. As co-hosts, what can you learn about our shared stories that is similar? And where are the common themes that we all share? So this is a great conversation to have with people that may not find climate change to be attractive. We've seen that now that clean renewable energy is competitive with dirty energy sources, there's a real shift for even people that are not concerned about climate change because, you know, what's not to love about clean energy? Now, in this conversation, now we're talking about asking questions like, how is the energy power you use generated? What are your thoughts about this type of power? Have you made any changes to the energy you use? Why? What is energy security? How would we know we have it? What are your concerns about the environment as it relates to our energy types? And you can have a great conversation about that. And maybe at some point you'll have another conversation about climate if that's of interest. But if it's not of interest, just, you know, finding the common ground and starting to work together can be truly valuable. The closing rounds after the round 3, It's reflection and accomplishments, next steps. Okay, you talk about, one or more of the following questions. What was most meaningful or valuable to you in the experience of the living room conversation? What learning, new understanding, or common ground was found on the topic? Has this conversation changed your perception of anyone in the group, including yourself? And then just a final close of, was anything accomplished here that you want to mention, and what is the next step based on this conversation? And that's a living room conversation, and it takes 2 hours typically in person. And I can say that when I had that conversation in Utah last year, 2 of the people in that conversation, our conversation was from 7 to 9. 2 of them stayed till 11, and it had to be like, gotta go home now. It's time to go. So when people get a chance to finally connect and talk about climate when they haven't, to people that have really different views, it can be very enlightening and exciting. It's fun. One of the things I often forget to emphasize is this is really fun. You meet people that you wouldn't otherwise meet, and many of them are absolutely marvelous. Finally, at the end of all this, I'm hoping you guys will send us the feedback forms, because that's how we learn. And you will be able to help us make these conversations better and better. And hopefully we can have huge numbers of them. Bottom line for this, everyone shares responsibility for keeping time and making it welcome. And when things get off topic, so anyone can note that, and we've done that before, and say, oh, let's put that in the parking lot. We can have a future conversation about that. And I've had some great future conversations that way, because it's not so rigid that you can't talk about many things. That's what happens. People are excited to actually be having a deep conversation about something they care about. And it's the conversation is owned by the people in the room, and they get to decide how it goes.
What I'll do here before opening it up then, Joan, thank you so much for your willingness to just help us out in figuring out how to best apply this in our own interests as CCL advocates, as well as just folks in general that are really interested in reaching across whatever we might be coming from, and having a chance to really jump in deeper and understanding folks with different perspectives. I'm just going to give a couple of slides contextualizing the thought of using a living room conversation within a CCL framework, and then we'll actually go to questions. Living room conversations are about extending your own network and not relying on other people or somebody else further away inside your own network of trying to figure out who is it in your life that you'd like to invite to one of these types of interactions. I know you'll actually in a little bit go over some tools that we might have available online. But because living room conversations are neutral, really in their intent of bringing people together, regardless of what their values or their perspective might be, and because this is an exercise of understanding others' values, I really think as CCLers, a tool to invite other conservative friends or liberal friends of theirs, a living room conversation that they really are going to be set up to make sure that it's safe, and not an opportunity to immediately push CCL on people. And one of the things I think with that then that I would recommend people really prepare for as they're thinking about using this living room conversation framework is a ground rule of not actually inviting other CCL members to the actual event, bridging out for people that are a part of your perspective, and then whoever you're setting up to host with a part of their perspective. Make sure that those folks are actually all non-CCL. That way that people don't come here and all of a sudden it's an ambush and all you end up talking about is carbon fee and dividend for 2 hours. Since this really is an exercise more rather than a closet recruitment exercise of understanding those values. And I think connected to that, what I've also heard you describe on tonight's webinar is just that living room conversations are designed really not to change opinions as much, especially since we're asking everyone to be vulnerable, instead focusing on building and hopefully maintaining these long-term relationships of trust with really no expectation of future involvement with an organization like ours, or really even kind of what that next step might be that you talked about in round 5. And I think some may find further down the road, obviously that conversation does lead towards involvement with the local CCL chapter or other forms of involvement advocating for carbon pricing with other friends or their network. But I think that's really key to emphasize. It's not a precondition for what motivates us to try hosting one of these.
That's a great note. One of the things that I should have mentioned is that the video living room conversation allows you to meet with friends all around the country, which is really very exciting. And we have something called Mismatch that we're working on that we will have in the not too distant future, I hope, for people that are having a hard time finding people with different viewpoints. So that's, and the video conversations tend to be 90 minutes instead of 2 hours. And we have a little bit of facilitation can be helpful with that. And we have a guide for that as well.
I love it. And I think we've got here on the link too of just kind of, if you see that slide, all of these slides we should say are hyperlinks to the actual resources online if you want. I'll actually even do this in the chat window for tonight's webinar, but later on when we post this, you'll actually get a chance to jump right in and be able to kind of look at what we're actually presenting as well. So there's the slides in the chat window. The other thing that I think Joan and I wanted to make sure to share for everyone is that there are support systems outside of even Mismatch when it becomes available for folks you know, in organizations like Citizens Climate Lobby. And these two that we're highlighting, one of which is a conversation group about living room conversations on Facebook. And that hyperlink there connects directly to it. I'll even put that in the chat window here in a little bit. And the other of which is we're creating a sub-thread in our own forums about this experience to help share best practices within CCL's groups to make sure that we can, you know, get started for folks that might, you know, be curious how this has happened. I can even see some of the questions coming in the chat window, getting to that, answering each other's questions, exchanging ideas, and really helping kind of make sure that this experience is as smooth as it can be for us all, since this is something that we presumably all haven't done before.
I think the only other thing I would share is a strong encouragement for this relationship building piece, because persuasion, one of the things I always note is if everyone in leadership in DC decided tomorrow that climate is their top issue, if they are not treating each other with respect, if they're not in right relationship, we need to have functional leadership that's working collaboratively. So on some level, I think this work is just key for shifting our national dynamics back to one of respectful relationship with people that we don't agree with.
Well, what better place to start than our own homes, right? Here's a page of resources that you recommend, and also we'd love to share with other group members about just how to have healthy conversations and bridge those divides from a wide variety of resources here that I think is a really valuable way that are also available here in tonight's notes. Put the links here to both the contact us form for living room conversations, as well as how to sign up for the actual weekly newsletter that Joan was talking about. You can just scroll down to the bottom and there's a banner there. And then if you have any questions about, you know, living room conversations in general, there's an info at livingroomconversations.org. You're more than welcome to email me. Mine is just brett@citizensclimate.org. And at this point, Joan, did you want to start or end by sharing kind of a successful start in Saratoga and that story?
Happy to. And, you know, also to just say thank you so much for the invitation to do this, because this is the topic I care the most about, and I love what you are doing and would be absolutely thrilled if, you know, Citizens Climate Lobby, you know, took this the next stage to really making this a big thing with climate and energy conversations. So I was on my way to Saratoga to the Faith in Innovation conversation when I saw two big signs like this on the street, and I didn't even know about it. They have them every fourth Tuesday in Saratoga. So there are cities and there are churches that are starting to do living room conversations as a monthly practice. And it is just a wonderful thing to do. I have read some pieces written by people that have had 20 living room conversations and how it has kind of changed their way of being in the world. It's a great practice for beginning relationships, but I'm starting to learn that people are finding it as a way of better understanding themselves and having better relationships with others. We didn't think it was for families, but then I get all these stories about, I had this much better conversation with my father. I had a better conversation with my nephew. And I'm going, this is good. So it's, we're learning all the time, and love to have you become part of this community in whatever way serves you. It's fun.
Spoken from the heart, Joan. Well, we want to thank you. I mean, you're the reason why we're all so excited. The lesson will be shared tomorrow. That was that slide's highlight. But let's close just by thanking our wonderful speaker for both the March National Call and tonight's Citizens Climate University. Joan, it's an honor to collaborate with you. We are leaving inspired and enthused to try this out in our own communities, and we will certainly be in touch on how they go.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful week.